Welcome back to the channel, everybody. And today it's my number 5 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive series. It's the Miami Dolphins. Make sure you hit the like and leave a comment in the comment section below. Help out with those YouTube algorithms. Boost this channel up. Get me some views. Get me some subs. And subscribe if you haven't already. If this is your first time, welcome back. And the Miami Dolphins are just, oh my God, I can't believe we're in the top 5. Not that the Dolphins are in the top 5, but we're finally doing the top 5 here. And the Dolphins were a team that last year made a lot of big moves, acquiring Tyreek Hill, got a brand new head coach in Mike McDaniel, and we saw a completely new renaissance of that offense. You include Jalen Waddle in there, who somehow is a wide receiver 2 on this roster with Tyreek Hill there. And the scheme of Mike McDaniel coming into play, and just how much more fluid and dominant they could be. And everyone sort of doubted whether Tyreek Hill would be able to repeat what he did in Kansas City. And I would argue that statistically it was more impressive what he did, considering he was doing it with lesser of a quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa, who had some seriously scary concussion issues. And I'm personally shocked that he's decided to come back and play at all. I don't know that I would have done it if it was me, but he is back. He's been taking jiu-jitsu, and apparently that's going to help him not get concussed anymore. But really what's going to stop him from getting concussed is the play of the offensive line, which is still extremely suspect at best. Not a whole lot of improvements were made. They're pretty much rolling out the exact same offensive line they had last year, which is not ideal. But we'll get to that. What they do have now is a defense that talent-wise is one of the best in the NFL. They did acquire Jalen Ramsey after cutting Byron Jones. Jalen Ramsey did, I think it was a complete tear of the meniscus in training camp. So he's going to be out, they say, till at least November. So that did affect his grade. It did affect the way that I applied him to the overall defense. But still, even with that, an extremely talented defense that has really good pieces on the edge, really good pieces right up the middle, including a great new run-stopping linebacker in David Long Jr. to pair up with Jerome Baker. That's going to be a really good duo for them, hopefully, going forward. Xavier Howard gets a step back into cornerback 1 role for the first couple months of the season with Kadir Kahu. Is that his name? Who kind of broke out last year. He's going to start getting some starter reps, it looks like. And then the rookie Cam Smith, who it looked like it was going to be a bit of a luxury pick, sort of just make a strength, keep adding to his strength, keep a strength type of a deal. But then with Jalen Ramsey going down, now the rookie's going to be thrown in potentially those first couple months of the season and sort of trial by fire for the 3rd round pick. I believe he was a 3rd round pick. 3rd round pick or 2nd round pick. He was a day 2 pick because the Dolphins didn't have a 1st round pick. Overall, this team was designed at first around Brian Flores, who did overachieve with this roster, I will say. And when he was fired, I think it surprised a lot of people. But to me, it was almost like how much further could this team get with the way this coach performs? Is the ceiling high enough with this coach? And they thought that wasn't the case. They thought if they got more of an offensive guy in there, specifically an offensive guy that is of the coaching tree of what is now really the most successful offense in football, that Shanahan coaching tree, that would not drastically improve the roster and the play and the performance and the raise the ceiling of all the other players around them, make better use of certain players. And Tua definitely did look much better in that Mike McDaniel Shanahan style offense than he did with Brian Flores and the offense they were running under him. Where it does take a step back now is that you've sort of lost that Brian Flores defensive mentality. You've added in Vic Fangio. And for those of you that follow that franchise guy, TFG, Marcus Whitman, like I do, I agree with him on a lot of things involving the Fangio defense and how it sort of has become a bit overrated. There was a period of time when that style of defense was sort of brand new, and it was really hard for opposing offensive coordinators to adjust to it. But now it seems that the teams that run it, they don't really achieve high-level defensive play. Now, we could talk about that being a talent issue, but they have the actual guy, Vic Fangio himself, coaching the defense. So maybe having the actual guy there, he'll know how to get the absolute best out of that defense. I think Javon Holland specifically really does suit that style of defense in particular. I do like Jalen Ramsey, and when he finally does show up and be able to play, in, hopefully in the wintertime for that last little month in the playoff stretch, how he'll fit in, because Jalen Ramsey is probably the most complete cornerback in the NFL. You know, maybe as a shutdown corner, he may not be number one anymore, but he's still, I think, top 5. And I think in terms of being just a physical threat and being somebody you can line up anywhere in that secondary, line up in the slot on early downs for running situations, you know, match up against whichever wide receiver, regardless of where they play, and him being able to come up and make plays in the run game, that is going to be invaluable. So I expect that aspect of the Miami Dolphins defense to immediately get better once Ramsey steps on the field. Just a matter of when he's going to be able to do that. But I think this is going to be Mike McDaniel growing yet again. He was kind of thrust into this position out of nowhere, and I think that does make him a little lesser on my list of head coaches, but we'll get to the coaching grades right here before the player grades as we start as always. And yeah, let's do that. So it is my 14th coaching staff. We did touch upon a lot of the things I think about this staff in the intro, but I'll try to go into a little bit more here. We'll start with Mike McDaniel, a really young coach. He was the running game coordinator. I think last year, from what I heard, was the first year he actually called plays, you know, because that's really Kyle Shanahan's job. So he was learning a lot on the job, and I think he did a damn good job considering he was thrust. There was a lot of having to build a roster that fit the scheme that he wanted on the offensive side of the ball, trying to relate, trying to step into a role. He went straight from, I don't even think he was a coordinator. He might have been the year before. I don't think he was. I think he was just the running game coordinator for the 49ers. So he's sort of learning on the job here in general, you know, being such a young guy and trying to, develop these talents like a Tua Tagovailoa, who he seems to have found the way to do that. I'd be interested to see how Tua performs this year. A full healthy season, hopefully, for him. And now with a roster that's a little bit more his style, with a little bit more of his pieces out there. They did draft Devin A-Chain to be a part of that backfield. Mike Gesicki's no longer on the team. Hunter Long's no longer on the team. They added Braxton Berrios. I don't know how much he's going to play. Tyler Kroft came here. He used to play for San Francisco. He played for Cincinnati. He sort of bounced around the league quite a bit. But how he grows as a play caller in a situational football, sense, is going to be something to watch, because the raw talent that this team has, it's really focused on certain areas. But when you have a guy like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're going to score a lot of points just sort of naturally, because you assume that both of them are going to account for at least 10 touchdowns apiece. So there's that. So you're pretty much guaranteed to put points on the board with that type of a roster. And then you got Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Devin A-Chain. You even got Myles Gaskin and Salvin Ahmed, who are all going to be used as cogs in that running game, and even in the receiving game I would anticipate as well. Cedric Wilson's another player that's going to get some reps at wide receiver when they go to more traditional sets. Vic Fangio is going to just have the task of trying to, like I said at the intro, revitalize the style, revitalize the Fangio scheme through his run here with the Dolphins, because I think a lot of people that have been following the league pretty closely, despite the fact that the league is a little bit behind, it seems, on this, that the Fangio defense has been figured out. A lot of the teams that run him, I think, are in the bottom 10 or 12 defenses in the NFL for the last 2 years. I think that's a real stat. You have to go back and watch TFG's video on the Fangio defense. It's a really, really great video how he breaks it down. But he does have the pieces here. They traded for Bradley Chubb last year, and Bradley Chubb was I believe he was drafted by Vic Fangio when he was the Denver Broncos head coach. So how he fits in there, I think that it was a bit of an overpay. I think they thought that they were in a position to make a run, so they traded a first-round pick, and then Tua went down, so it kind of screwed up what we could have potentially saw from the Dolphins in terms of a playoff run last year. So maybe they feel like that was an investment well worth it, and bringing him back here this year with an extended contract. Jalen Phillips developed rapidly last year, looked like a superstar edge rusher at times, is pretty decent as well. Against the run, they got a good interior performance from Christian Wilkins. They signed, they traded for Jalen Ramsey. They traded for Deshaun Elliott, or they signed Deshaun Elliott, one of the two. They might trade like a 7th-round pick for Elliott. But they brought in all these guys on the defense side of the ball that would suit Vic Fangio and that defense and what he wants to do with them in terms of the versatility of certain positions, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, is it just the disciples that don't know how to really and truly execute this defense down the line? Or is it just the scheme has been picked apart for so long and so often because so many people were running it that now it's sort of antiquated? We'll see how that works out. And that's what really at the end of the day is hurting this coaching staff ranking. You get an offensive coordinator, not a lot of experience, a defensive coordinator that seems to be, perhaps, for lack of a better term, behind the times and washed up, and then a head coach with just not a lot of experience. So it's hard to put these guys ahead of some of the other staffs that I have ranked ahead of them that have a little bit more experience and have sort of proven that that they know what they're doing more so than being carried by specific talents like you would see with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, for example. So let's talk about the quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. He gets an 81 as a thrower. Does not have the elite arm strength. He's like probably bottom 5 in terms of arm strength in the NFL. But he has really good accuracy. And one thing that he's learning is the jiu-jitsu, which I think is going to also help with his footwork. I think that's not something people have been talking about a lot, but taking any type of martial arts is going to help you with your footwork, your foot placement, the way you lower your center of gravity, and all those things all come into play. So that's a really more complete skill that Tua Tagovailoa has actually started to pick up, other than just learning how to tuck his chin. He could have taken a professional wrestling class to learn how to tuck his chin when he fell. Mike White is the backup. You saw Mike White sort of catch fire in the meme world last year as the Jets quarterback. But it just goes to show how great that Jets defense was, and we covered it in the last video, that Mike White got all that praise, and this is the grade that he gets, and it's a well-earned grade. Skylar Thompson was thrown into a no-win situation last year as he was like the 3rd or 4th string quarterback on the team. Bridgewater was hurt. Tua was hurt, and he had to go and play a playoff game against the Buffalo Bills. Just brutal. Absolutely brutal. I don't think that's necessarily a reflection on him. He was a rookie, but he's also he was a late pick, I think. I think he was like a 6th or 7th round pick, and it was for a reason. He wasn't ready to play in the NFL, let alone a playoff game against a playoff caliber football team the way that he did. So it was a no-win situation for him. But Tua, you hope you can get a full year out of him and that he can continue to grow as a quarterback. I just don't know how high the ceiling is for him talent-wise because of the lack of arm strength. I think that he can be put in situations, especially in the Shanahan offense, Shanahan-style offense, where he can succeed as much as anyone else. So I think that's an important note to make, is the way that he would suit the style of the offense and the scheme could make him perform at a level that looks better than somebody who might just have more raw natural talent than him. Who has more natural talent than Tua? Let's say Justin Herbert, right? Justin Herbert is a much better prototypical quarterback with the arm strength and all that, but when you have Tua in there, Tua could potentially, by the end of this year, have a much better statistical output, certainly have more wins, and look like a better quarterback than Justin Herbert just because of the way he fits this scheme in comparison to how Justin Herbert would have to then play within his scheme and against the opponents that he has, et cetera, et cetera. So you could get a lot of quality out of Tua. I think that's why they committed to him the way that they did. But I do think that they've left the door open a bit for them to bring in somebody else. Shedeur Sanders. You heard it. You heard it here first. You heard it here first that this Miami Dolphins team will be looking at Shedeur Sanders if he comes out in this upcoming draft. I said it. But overall, I think Tua, I've always liked Tua from the moment he got drafted. It's just the concussion issues you really concern yourself with, because if he gets one more, it's over. It really is over. So to be in that situation, it is scary, and I think that's going to cause a lot of anxiety for a Dolphins fan base and for the Dolphins team in general, which is why I also think that this might be his last year with the team, barring some miraculous MVP winning performance, which I just don't think he has in him anyway. So I do believe this is his last year, pretty much regardless of what happens, just based upon the fact that he's cracked glass at this point, ready to shatter. Now let's move to the running backs, and this has always been a key feature of the Shanahan-style offense. It's been an offense that, in general, hasn't really required a top-level talent at the running back position for a long time for it to see a lot of success. Christian McCaffrey going to San Francisco last year was really the first time in a long time you could point at being like, wow, this is a superstar running back in this system, because the system's sort of designed to take advantage of defensive pursuit, and it's also so creative in the sense that it naturally opens up holes, and all you need really is a running back with good vision and is willing to make that one-cut commitment. And with Raheem Mostert and the rookie Devin Achane from Texas A&M specifically, I think they got a great 1-2 punch on early downs. Raheem Mostert, I do think, gets the bulk of the carries as long as he stays healthy. And Devin Achane, I think, will be worked in gradually on these early downs. And then we'll see, I think, a combination of Mostert and Jeff Wilson once we get to like the third down situations, the passing situations, where even though Mostert is not as good in that as someone like Salvon Ahmed, I do anticipate that I don't think Salvon Ahmed and Myles Gaskins are going to be getting on the field a whole lot. You see Alec Ingold in there, fullback. You're going to see him work quite a bit this season, but not necessarily as a receiving back. You're going to see him in the running game as a blocker, playing that fullback role, that Kyle Juszczyk role that this offense demands. But I think Jeff Wilson, his real how he's going to be applied in this offense will mostly be on third downs as a relief for Raheem Mostert, because I think that they'll like him better than Devin Achane in the receiving game in particular, even when it comes to picking up blitzes. It's not something Devin Achane necessarily was good at Texas A&M. So I think having that skill set in Jeff Wilson, even though Jeff Wilson's not necessarily high level at that either, will put Jeff Wilson in a position where he's always going to have a role in this offense. So it'll be a true, in my opinion, three-headed monster in the running game, and no running whatsoever from Tua Tagovailoa. None. He's going to be he's going to have the running stats of Peyton Manning by the end of the season. I guarantee you they are not going to put him in a position to do that. It's going to be a running game solely carried by the backfield, which is why I also would anticipate that they might keep all of these guys, find a way to keep all these guys. Maybe Salvon Ahmed ends up on the practice squad, gets ready to be called up during the season in the case they pick up an injury. But I don't really see, just based upon how this offense I think has to be run this year and how Mike McDaniel wants to run this offense and how the Shanahan offense is traditionally run, that there's a need to get rid of any of these guys, because Salvon Ahmed is a different type of player on the field. Myles Gaskins, sort of the same thing. They don't have the high upside in any real aspect like you would see with Raheem Mostert or Devin Achane. But I think that in a pinch, there's people that you can bring in that are reliable and that can actually make a play or two for you if you need them to in a certain situation in a certain game. Now the fun part of this offense, the receivers and the tight ends, specifically the receivers, probably the best 1-2 wide receiver pairing in the entire NFL. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are up there. But Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are just so dynamic. They're people that can run short, intermediate, deep routes in any situation. And you can mix and match them in what they do. You can't really predict what either one's going to do because they both can really do a lot of the same things. Tyreek Hill, I think, is a little bit more of a dynamic player than Jalen Waddle is. But having Jalen Waddle as your number 2 is absolutely insane because on pretty much every other team in the NFL, minus maybe 1 or 2, he's a number 1 receiver on that team, absolutely default. So, I think we'll see another great year from both of these guys. I'm anticipating a 1,500-yard season from Tyreek Hill, probably a 1,400-yard season from Jalen Waddle. It's where the other stats come from. I'm not sure that there's a number 3, whether it be a third wide receiver or one of these tight ends that's truly going to be the third receiving threat. So I think that's really going to be up in the air quite a bit. You have Tyler Kroft and you have Durham Smythe. I have them both there because I feel like you'll see a lot of them on the field at the same time. Just with the way that Tua plays, you're keeping it between the numbers. For a lot of this, working the play action pass to help try to negate some of the pass rush to keep Tua safer during the season. So who's the number 3 guy? Who's the number 3 target? Is it a running back in the passing game? That's where the real question marks are starting to come up for this group, but I expect this to be the regular personnel as much as possible. 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, with then Raheem Mostert in the backfield. And then, you might even work in Alec Ingold at some point, taking out one of these tight ends and having Ingold, wham block and all that. But, is it Cedric Wilson? Is it River Craycroft, who's sort of an under-the-radar guy? Is it Braxton Berrios, who had some really good moments for the New York Jets? Is it Eric Ezukanma? However you pronounce it, who was drafted last year. Could it be him? They have Robbie Anderson, who's now chosen Anderson because of course he is, that freaking goofball. One of the most notoriously overpaid players, but could he have some sort of renaissance here and play like a number 3 receiver in the system? Who knows? And then you got Eric Sobert, who's just a third tight end. I expect him to just sort of be a blocking type, so you might see him on early downs. So I think that there's a world where we'll see Hill and Waddle out there with Sobert at tight end and then Alec Ingold in the backfield as a fullback, running some motion the way you'd see Kyle Juszczyk do it, and then Raheem Mostert, Devin Achane in the backfield. I think that could be a set that we'll see quite often. But they need somebody to step up and be that third receiving target. Sobert probably not going to be that guy. He'll be on the field I think he'll be on the field more than people expect, like I said, but I don't know that he's that guy. So is it Tyler Kroft? Is it Durham Smythe? Who's stepping up as that third statistical output in the passing game for Tua? Because Hill and Waddle, they can put up a combined, they can put 200 catches, 3,000 yards, and 20 touchdowns between the two of them, which is a great output, but you still need to find, I would say, about 1,000 more yards out of this group. And I do wonder how that split is going to come about in fantasy football talks. Outside of the top 2 guys there's no point in touching anyone in this Dolphins receiver or tight ends room if you're playing fantasy football, because there's no path for any of them to be real contributors in that sense. It doesn't seem like it, at least at this point. Okay, let's talk about the offensive line of the Miami Dolphins. A group that I am thoroughly shocked they did not address more than what they did in free agency, which they didn't address. I don't think they addressed it really at all in free agency. They barely did, at least. They only didn't bring in somebody that could be a high-level starter, that's for sure. They brought in guys who can compete with the worst guys on the roster. We'll get to that depth in a moment. And they drafted, I think, just one guy, Ryan Hayes, out of Michigan, who's like a guard tackle hybrid type player. You don't really know where he's going to be. Sounds a lot like that dark red grade right there of Liam Eichenberg, who just hasn't worked out, but is seemingly still finding himself in the starting lineup. He has been absolutely terrible. Even next to Teron Armstead, he's really affected Teron Armstead's game when the Teron Armstead has played in a real negative sense. Armstead's been in a position where he's pretty much had to try and do the job of two people. Connor Williams really turned out to be a great option for them to play center. Personally, I was expecting them to address center in this draft so they can move Connor Williams to guard. And then I think that would have at least solidified one side of the offensive line, the left side of the offensive line at the very least. But they chose not to do that. So Connor Williams coming back at center, great center. He was one of the best centers in the league last year. Robert Hunt is the epitome of solid in every aspect of the game at the right guard position. And then there's former first-round pick Austin Jackson, who just never seemingly became the guy that they wanted him to when they took him as the 18th overall pick in the draft a couple years ago. It was the same year I think they took Tua. He never became that guy, and he's sort of sitting there as one of the worst right tackles in football, if not the worst right tackle in football, and he's the one in charge of Tua's blind side because as Tua being a left-handed quarterback. And they did nothing significant, in my opinion, to address these offensive line issues. Now, I think Kendall Lamb could be somebody who you could slide in there at right tackle, perhaps. Ryan Hayes could be that guy as well. But there are other deficiencies in their game, specifically in the run game, that also makes them not a great option. They signed Isaiah Wynn from the Patriots, but there was a reason why Isaiah Wynn was let go. He did not perform well down the stretch there in his Patriots career. Lester Cotton is good in the passing game. He is absolutely horrific in the run game. Dan Feeney's just like a backup center, really. They don't really have a backup center on this team. They don't even really have a true center on this team when you think about it, because Connor Williams was a tackle at Texas, converted to guard when he got drafted by the Cowboys, and then converted to center when he got picked up by the Dolphins. So there's just a lot of question marks here in the passing game. And in the run blocking aspect, it doesn't get much better at all. Liam Eichenberg, terrible. Better at run blocking, but absolutely god-awful. Teron Armstead, a little bit, not as good as of a run blocker as a pass blocker, still solid. Connor Williams, significantly better as a run blocker. Austin Jackson, same story as Liam Eichenberg. And Robert Hunt, like I said, solid all the way around, but not, people talk about him playing right tackle. His position in the NFL is right guard. That's where he really plays at his best. That's where you want him to be. And this is where I'm talking about the depth problems here. You saw Kendall Lamb was actually much better in pass blocking. He's basically the same as a run blocker. So, I mean, do you just say, hey, Kendall Lamb, can you play right tackle for us over Austin Jackson? And hope that his perceived skill level is significantly different than Austin Jackson's in that sense? I don't know that you can do that. Ryan Hayes could, I think, quietly should probably end up becoming the left tackle, or the left guard, excuse me. And then Liam Eichenberg sort of just joins the right tackle competition. Do you plug and play Isaiah Wynn at right tackle and just hope that he can get back to where he was, that early in his Patriot career where he did look like he was going to be a really solid player? Or is he just more of a guard at the next level as well? There shouldn't be these types of question marks for two really key positions on this offensive line, specifically the blindside tackle. They should not have put themselves in this situation. This was an extremely irresponsible move for now 2 years in a row to play it this way. Maybe I can understand last year they thought we're bringing in Teron Armstead. Maybe that makes the offensive line a little bit better. Austin Jackson will take a step forward, or Liam Eichenberg will improve, and we'll get two solid tackles now. That did not happen. They were not better last year than they were the year before. They should have addressed this. Now, I brought this up in the Jets video as well, and the Jets aren't nearly as in dire straits, but if you're the Dolphins, are you calling Dallas and asking about Tyron Smith? Personally, yes. I don't know that the Cowboys make that trade anyway. At least not until some point middle of the season when they maybe have a couple more things figured out. But I think that's got to be somewhere at the top of your list. If you're the Dolphins, it just has to be. You have to sort of take note of these guys who can come in, veteran types who can come in, start at right tackle for you at least. Having a bad left guard, if the other positions on the offensive line are covered, that's not that big of a deal. You can make up for it in the passing game. Connor Williams can always help out with the pass blocking. You can always run the ball away from Eichenberg and, just work around that deficiency. But you can't have two extreme deficiencies on your offensive line, one on each side of the ball, especially on the blind side. People are like, oh, you got Teron Armstead, you got a great left tackle. That means nothing when you have a left-handed quarterback. So something drastic has to happen this year on this offensive line for them to, I think, see the next level. I don't know that they can sustain an entire playoff run and get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl with those types of deficiencies. Even though I rank them higher than the Jets because I do think they match up really well against the Jets. I think if the Jets can avoid them in the playoffs, the Jets are more capable of making a Super Bowl run than the Dolphins are. I just think that the Dolphins, the way they match up against the Jets, is just a really good matchup for them. But Austin Jackson needs to do something. Or Liam Eichenberg needs to do something and then kick out to right tackle, because this, you talk about Tua's health issues, this is another reason why I feel that this is Tua's last go around with the Dolphins, at least, because he is going to be in trouble a lot this year from his blind side, and there's going to be a lot of block assists that have to happen out there, so you're not going to have as many guys running routes, which is why I also feel like you're going to see the two tight end sets a lot as well, and why maybe having a third wide receiver might not be that big of a deal. So just running through the positional summaries again, you can see it yourself. The offensive line is a giant red flag. We need to see those two bad players really step up, or it will drag down the entire offense. So even with that terrible offensive line, they're still the 17th best offense in football for me. The 17th pass offense, the 13th rush offense. And I think with that amount of talent, that talent level, Mike McDaniel is going to be more than capable of scheming this offense into at least performing statistically like a top 10 offense. But I think talent-wise, they're still significantly behind some of the upper, like the top 10 offenses in the NFL. Now let's get to the defensive side of the football, which is really going to be the thing that drives this football team. This defense is going to put the offense in a lot of short fields, you would hope, and keep games low scoring for some of those more deficiencies that they have on the offensive side of the ball. And it starts with Jalen Phillips, who really did a great job last year stepping up. Graded out as one of the best edge rushers in the entire league last year, and I expect a somewhat similar performance this year. He's got Bradley Chubb opposite of him, and he's also got a really good interior rush group that's going to consist of Christian Wilkins and then a nice rotation next to Wilkins with Zach Seiler being probably the best one coming out, but there's going to be plenty of other options as well to kick inside. Bradley Chubb, who was traded for a first-round pick and got a big contract, there's the tall task of him having to perform up to that number, which he didn't really due towards the end there in Denver. I'm not sure that he ever really reached that number. Was a fifth overall, sixth overall pick edge rusher. And he's going to have some competition there. I know he just got paid quite a bit, but a nice healthy rotation in there could be in his future when you got a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel. May not be the best pass rusher, might be more of an off-ball linebacker on early downs, on these later downs. But I think that his ability in the run game, which is significantly better than Bradley Chubb, is going to give Van Ginkel a lot of opportunities. And if Van Ginkel, when he's out there on the field on perceived run downs where he's supposed to set an edge and ends up being a pass play and he makes plays in the backfield, that'll cut into Bradley Chubb's snaps and that'll move Bradley Chubb around a bit, perhaps into like Emmanuel Ogbah role, which you'll see him here. Emmanuel Ogbah is sort of that third interior guy, like an undersized interior player. He's had some really good years, but there could be a situation where Bradley Chubb and Emmanuel Ogbah are the ones competing for snaps. Despite the fact that Ogbah got a nice contract, Bradley Chubb got a nicer one. I don't think NFL teams are afraid anymore of paying certain guys, but then if they don't perform, they don't play. We saw it with Kenny Golladay with the New York Giants. They're gonna use the best guys at the moment. They're not going to just throw in a guy who's not performing because he makes a lot of money. That guy's going to get a lot more opportunities, sure, but if he doesn't live up to those opportunities, then he's not going to play. And I'm not saying that Bradley Chubb is in some risk of being benched. I just think that if you're getting paid like a top edge rusher, you need to perform like one. And not performing like one, performing like a number two behind Jalen Phillips, who I think is gonna he's in like his third year. So they're gonna pick up his fifth year option. He needs to win snaps on early downs from somebody who's much better in the run game. And this is where you see it. Van Ginkel scores an 80 in the run game. So this is where he's going to live. He's going to live on these early downs, and he's going to get opportunities to show that he can also be a pass rusher. Now, does that kick Bradley Chubb inside? Probably. It probably might kick him inside to be more of like an interior guy next to a Christian Wilkins on these passing downs. But on these early downs, I expect to see Phillips, Wilkins, Seiler, Van Ginkel, and then probably Emmanuel Ogbah as like your base 3-4, with then Baker and Long as your linebackers. But this is where Van Ginkel really shines because he's an edge rusher. He's kind of also an off-ball linebacker. He's got kind of the skill, that hybrid skill set, which suits a 3-4 outside linebacker because he can drop back in coverage a little bit sometimes, better so than a Phillips or Bradley Chubb. We're just straight up 4-3 defensive end types playing outside linebacker edge rushers. But a really solid interior group here also against the run, which is going to help. And you got two really good linebackers as well. So it's going to be very difficult to run the ball on this defense, even with some of the depth they have. Like Bradley Chubb is not necessarily bad against the run. He's just not as good as the two other guys. I think Malik Reed is also another guy that's a little bit better in the run game. I think that he's somebody that could see some snaps on early downs as well. Emmanuel Ogbah, you see there, gets a 70 grade. So he's sort of like the third interior guy in every aspect at this point. Because Seiler really did a good job last year stepping up. Wilkins took a giant leap forward and established himself as one of the better interior defensive linemen in the league. But that's a good problem to have. I think they got really nice depth here. And there's a lot of teams, from my perspective, at least you've seen through this series, that lack a lot of depth on the interior defensive line because it's a lot of guys who are just average at one aspect and then not really good at the other. So they don't really have a full-time place. And I think when you have a guy in your depth who can get starter reps and you won't feel like you have shortchanged that aspect of your defense, that's a really important and key aspect of what makes this Dolphins defense also so good. Now let's move on to the linebackers. The linebackers against the pass, you got Jerome Baker, sort of undersized, but a really good athlete. Good blitzer, good in coverage. And then David Long, who was basically brought in to be more of an early down linebacker, though I do think you'll still see him in these passing scenarios. His real strength is in the run game, but he's still in terms of playing in coverage, playing in space as a linebacker in pass coverage. Still the second best guy on the roster. They don't have a lot of depth in that sense. Channing Tindall, who they drafted last year, just Duke Riley, another one, just not good. So not a lot of depth of the linebacker group for the Dolphins. But in the run game, you see David Long. He's one of the best. He had an amazing performance last year against the run, and that's really why he was brought in here, was to bring that to this linebacking group, because you have Jerome Baker, who is he's not terrible by any means against the run, but he is undersized. And you lost some of the bigger body linebackers over the last couple of years that really played well in the run game, that sort of hid Jerome Baker's deficiencies in that sense. And they just don't have a lot of depth in general. Channing Tindall is a second-year player, so you expect maybe some type of step forward from the former third-round pick. He was a third-round pick, I think, the 100th overall pick in the draft last year. So you hope that you can get some type of development out of him in one aspect of the game, so you can take one of these linebackers off the field to give him a breather at least. So, but it is, the depth here is a weak point for sure of the overall defense. So now we're going to move on to the secondary, and conspicuous by his absence is Jalen Ramsey. I did not include him in the screen of starters because this is basically what I expect day one. And you don't know when Jalen Ramsey's coming back. Again, November the earliest is when you can expect Jalen Ramsey back based upon the surgery that he had. And you almost don't want to rush him back, because even without him, you can still see this defense is not bad. They got a lot of stuff up front that can help on the back end. Xavier Howard, good coverage guy, really good against the run. That's sort of the thing that him and Ramsey both bring. They're both good in coverage, and they're both top-notch in the NFL at the cornerback position in playing against the run as well. Kahu, breakout year last year. Cam Smith drafted this year. Probably didn't expect to play all that much when Jalen Ramsey was acquired, but now he's thrust into that spot. Javon Holland, really balanced safety, really fits the Fangio defense. Deshaun Elliott's another guy who I expect to see here playing on these passing downs. But you see Ramsey there. He still gets an 86 grade for me in coverage, which is a little bit lower than what I initially had him because of the injury, but I expected him to come back to deliver that 86 score. Even a guy like Nick Needham is there, good special teams guy, but a solid choice. Noah Igbenogany never really has panned out. Keon Crossan is more of a special teams guy. They drafted Verone McKinley. They have Brandon Jones out there, but I expect to see Brandon Jones specifically on early downs, more so than in the passing game. But yeah, you can see the depth on this. The depth is actually quite good as well, especially if you put Jalen Ramsey into that starting lineup. Cam Smith or Kahu comes off, and then you got another really good depth piece there. So they have set themselves up by drafting the way that they have, especially picking up Cam Smith, that they were ready to go a couple of games where they might be missing somebody. They were hoping, I guess, obviously that wasn't Jalen Ramsey of all people, but they were ready nonetheless. So now let's take a look at them in run support. And this is where Cam Smith is not very good coming in. Kahu, you expect some pretty decent things. Xavier Howard is one of the better players in run support. He was last year. He played really good against it. Javon Holland, again, really balanced. You can really play him anywhere. You can drop him into the slot. You can play him deep in really any situation. It's even in the run game. Deshaun Elliott coming over from that Ravens defense, the Lions defense, where they play really hard nose in all levels of the defense. So he's ready to come in and contribute in run support as well. Brandon Jones is really good in that aspect. Jalen Ramsey, you see it there, the best cornerback in football against the run by a mile. There's no one better, in my opinion, than Jalen Ramsey against the run. on those early down situations, those second and short situations. You can put him in that nickel role, and he's going to be able to get off a block and make a tackle on a running back as good as anybody. Noah Igbenogany has had success in run support, but his lack of success in coverage has really hurt his stock on this team. And it's like, yeah, you can be good in run support, but that just means you're going to be a special teams player most likely, which is not the result you want for a guy you took with a first-round pick. So taking a look at the positional summary, and you can see in the passing game, not really any deficiencies there. When Jalen Ramsey comes back, you're going to see an improvement for sure. In the run game, extremely good, extremely balanced, no real issue there. Maybe the safeties could be a little bit better, but when you have such a strong front seven the way that the Dolphins do against the run, a lot of you're going to be expecting a lot of 4 yards or less in the run game, at least from your opponents. So despite the Jalen Ramsey injury, this is still my third best defense in football. They're 11th against the pass, so there are going to be probably a little bit of issues in the first couple of months. But then once Ramsey comes back, Xavier Howard becomes cornerback 2. He immediately becomes probably one of the best number 2 cornerbacks in the NFL. They probably become one of, if not the best cornerback duo in the NFL. And then the run defense just is superior, an elite level run defense. You just hope, again, like that Vic Fangio can make his scheme work again in the NFL. That is the main concern, but we'll see how that all pans out because he does have the talent to make it work. He just needs to make it work scheme and play calling wise. So now let's take a look at their schedule, and I got them going 13-4. They sweep the Jets, which gives them the tiebreaker and puts them ahead of them in the standings and in these rankings because of that. I got them splitting with Buffalo, and all their losses, I got them coming on the road. And I do have them getting caught by the Washington football team, the Washington Commanders. I just see the Dolphins team as being a team that can get got. Especially, like I feel like that the Washington game, the Tennessee game, them being sandwiched by those 2 games against the Jets, either one of those could be a trap game, I feel. The Washington game, after playing it on the road against the Jets and then playing on the road against Washington, did you give so much of yourself to that Jets game that you then get caught against Washington? Or do you shift your focus a little too early to the New York Jets and the Dallas Cowboys, Baltimore, and Buffalo, that last 4 games, which is a bit of a gauntlet, too early and then get caught by the Titans? I think that's a real possibility. Now, however, I also have them beating the Philadelphia Eagles. So if they happen to lose to the Eagles and beat Washington, they're still 13-4. So if they don't get caught by a team lesser than them trying to look ahead and get caught by a really good team that I have them beating, like the Philadelphia Eagles, or even one of those games by the New York Jets instead, they're still a 13-4 football team. So the quality is really there. It's just if they lose Tua, then I think that they might be a team that drops to like a 10-7 team. But I think that there's still enough there surrounding everything that's going to keep their head above water, even if they lose Tua for a couple of games. But if they do lose Tua, then they pretty much lose their ceiling, I will say that. But overall, they match up really well against a lot of teams, and they're going to be, it's going to be a track meet against a lot of these teams too. And they're just, so many of these rosters just are not capable of keeping up. So just a quick summary here again, 13-4, second in the division, 4th in the conference, 5th in the league, 14th best coaching staff, 17th total offense, 3rd in total defense. A lot of potential here, and I think that once Jalen Ramsey comes back and really solidifies that defense, hopefully, for that last little push of the regular season into the playoffs, they're a team capable of making a bit of a run here. And there you have it, my number 5 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Miami Dolphins. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Do all those things. Helps boost the algorithms, boost visibility, and boost me into that ever so coveted monetization, hopefully. I'm only like 500 something subs away from that. So yes, I have to kind of double up what I got as of the recording of this video, but you guys can help me out with that. And please do. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys with the next video. We're into the top 5 now. There's the playlist and a future video that you can watch and enjoy from the channel. Subscribe at my chin. See you guys next time.